Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fanfiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
Sigh. A man deeply sighed to himself as he entered his home after escaping the plague-like air outside. The calming decor of the living room was a nice change of pace from the green fog after all. He proceeded to hang his air filter and goggles on the rack next to him. I'm home. The man known as Fuji Sato, or to a select few, Touch Me, had said that to no one in particular. While his wife and daughter would normally be the ones to receive that greeting, they were currently out running errands, so there was no point to use such a gesture. But it felt wrong not to do it, so he acted on impulse. What to do? Usually I just have small talk and rant about work. It's been a good while since I've had the place to myself. After unfastening his tie in the way a middle-aged man might after a long day at the office, he proceeded to release his fatigue by falling forward onto the couch. Once he found himself in a sufficiently comfortable position, he began to furrow his existent brows. Since Touch Me always boasted about protecting the weak, one might think that working as a police officer would be a dream job for him. However, reality is rarely so kind. More often than not, he found himself unable to do anything due to the overabundance of crime or being relegated to the sidelines, leaving him as nothing but a glorified hall monitor. Thus, he often found himself ranting to whoever was unfortunate enough to cross his path, the victim almost always being his wife. But with no one to share his misery with, he thus ranted to the only one present, himself. I swear if I have to deal with this shit one more time, I am going to quit. But we don't know if he was the one who did it. How? He was at the scene of the crime, with blood on his clothes. How do you not? Many similar shouts filled the room for a time. While it was true that people who were truly passionate about their job were a rarity, that also meant that they had to pick up the slack of the ones who weren't so caring. Thus, having to blow off steam in private could be seen as an essential matter. But, I can't quit now, can I? If I were to leave, then I would need to find a new job. And trying to find a job that pays as good as this one may just be a slight bit impossible. I just have to bear with it until I can retire. Besides, it's not like I'm truly miserable. It's still the closest I'll get to my dreams. Well, seeing as I've got some time to kill, what should I do? After thinking it through, his options weren't so vast. He could watch TV, but there was almost nothing to watch now. The news was basically for getting depressed, and he had watched practically every rerun of old superhero movies, so he crossed off that option in his mind. He had some board games that were available, though what's the point with only one player? This pattern of suggesting an idea and then trashing it continued on for a longer period than normal. It's at times like these where just how little there is to do becomes apparent. Oh. I guess I haven't used my VR set in a while. Ever since Yggdrasil had closed its servers, Touch Me had found himself using his VR set less and less, as that game was really the only thing he had used it for during his 8 years of playing. Even though he hadn't logged on in over 2 years, he still felt a tinge of regret upon hearing that it was shutting down. Even his old friend Momon had wanted to give one last hurrah on the last day, but he was so caught up with work that he wasn't able to make it. I do hope he forgives me for that, he thought to himself. I may as well look for something on it. Yggdrasil wasn't his only passion after all. After injecting himself with nanomachines, he put on his headset and began to flip haphazardly through his repertoire of games. After continuing in this motion for a minute, he saw something that caught his eye. Hang on, wasn't Yggdrasil shut down already? Why is the icon still available? Wouldn't the bots and government have taken it down by now? Since VR games worked by connecting with the user's brains that had been modified, it was important to remove games off the select screens. If they were shut down while someone was still in them, they may be stuck in a loading screen for a while, or in serious cases, enter a catatonic state. It was for these reasons that the government implemented heavy rules to log everyone off before the shutdown, then take the game off the market as soon as the servers were down. If Yggdrasil was still up, there would have been a storm of media on it since the game was popular enough for people to notice it still being up. If it's still here, then that would mean it's still playable, right? I mean, I would definitely have heard about one of my favorite games being under fire for not adhering to the law. Maybe I can say hi to Momon and apologize for not being at the meeting if he is still on. Having made his decision, TouchMe selected the icon for Yggdrasil, and hoped that the game was still up for him to do what he wanted. And then the world became a sea of white. Ugh, my head. After an unknown amount of time had passed, a dazed TouchMe found himself aching and dizzy, lying on what appeared to be solid stone. Either I was drugged and kidnapped, or I'm in a coma, because that's not normal, he thought to himself. The first thing he found odd was that he was feeling pain. In DMMRPGs, pain was not only basically impossible to program but also completely useless. Who would want to feel on fire in a virtual volcano? The second oddity was the location. If he were logged into Yggdrasil, then he would be at the Great Tomb and not wherever he was. After resting his hands on his head and antennae, he tried to assess the situation. If this was option A, then he would need to get a feel for his surroundings and try to negotiate with whoever had him here. If it was option... Wait, what? He suddenly shouted and recoiled back at the realization that he was most certainly not normal. When he looked at his arm, it was covered in dark green chitin plates, with black, muscular skin in between. After that, he looked at the rest of his body and noticed that it followed a similar trend. Side-like, serrated growths were attached at his wrist and ascended up the length of his forearm, ending at the elbow. His thighs and legs also had similar tooth-like edging to them, though much smaller, being an inch at the largest. His feet were similar to a normal person's, though each one ended with a sharp talon, like the ends of a tarantula's foot. All of this led him to only one conclusion. I was drugged, wasn't I? I mean, this is just ridiculous. I'm my old character from Yggdrasil, and I can actually feel things. This has to be me on some serious hallucinogens, right? Right? Although he was trying to comfort himself with these self-made lies, he was beginning to become seriously worried. If he suspended his disbelief for a moment and, for the sake of argument, was now in Yggdrasil, how was he going to get back? Are there other players here? What the fuck is happening? While complaining about his current predicament was a normal reaction, it was getting him nowhere fast. Maybe I can find a way out of here, it looks to be a cave from the look of things. Though my vision doesn't help me find a light source. As a heteromorphic race, TouchMe had access to dark vision as a passive ability. Almost all heteromorphs had this as a starting ability, and it remained useful throughout the game as it made dungeon crawling easier for those who could see at greater distances than, say, a torch could. Many players had actually complained to the devs about this since most picked human as their race and felt like they were losing out on treasures that others could see in the early game. To which the devs semi-sarcastically responded with, "Can you see in the dark?" And that was the end of it. TouchMe did, however, notice the path to his right was ascending, so he used common sense and followed it. He did encounter a wolf-like creature on his way, which had at first frightened him, but when the creature pounced at him, he threw a punch to attempt to defend himself. He found a wolf-shaped hole where the wall was. I guess I can assume that I'm the same level, at least, he thought. After 5 minutes of walking, he finally saw a light source that was brighter than the tunnel. If he was right, then that must be the outside, which meant it was currently daytime. As he left the dank tunnel, he felt a cool breeze and was soon awestruck. As far as the eye could see, there were giant trees that easily dwarfed the now extinct California redwood. Lush grass that seemed to be molded out of pure emerald, and a beautiful river that flowed a crystal blue. Picturesque was the only word that came to mind. While he was enamored with the sights before him, he found that his foot had accidentally knocked into what appeared to be a skeleton. It appeared to be in tattered clothes and had a bloodied short sword lying next to it. I guess he won't be needing that anymore. Turning thought into deed, TouchMe proceeded to retrieve the sword so he would at least have a weapon. But as he was about to leave, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. That wasn't like me at all. Normally, I'd at least feel a little saddened, or at the very least unnerved, after seeing something like that, right? Though death is hardly uncommon on Earth, it's still sad. Could I have adopted a more insect-like mindset due to my race? While thoughts like these were going through his head, he heard a commotion coming toward his location. In this unknown situation, his fight or flight kicked in, and he chose flight. He quickly hid behind a tree on an elevated piece of land that was above the trail leading to the cave. He needed to know who or what was coming. As the sun began to hit its peak, Nia Baraja and her band of mercenaries began to reach their destination. After the Jaldabaoth incident, Nia had taken it upon herself to keep the peace in the north by acting as a de facto pope of sorts, by spreading the name of the word of Ainz throughout the Holy Kingdom. While this was originally because she simply was enthralled by his charisma and simply wanted to improve his reputation in the Holy Kingdom, she had amassed a group of like-minded supporters, and her hobby had turned somewhat into a religion. While Nia was ready to reject the claim when people began to herald her as some important figure in the Holy Kingdom, she soon realized that she could use this as an opportunity to make the Holy Kingdom see the Sorcerer King for what he really was. A king of kings. And so, rumors of the Faceless One began to spread throughout the world. King Caspon seemed to support her in this decision, giving her some rights over the churches in the Holy Kingdom. Nia had no idea what she had done to earn Caspon's favor, but was nonetheless happy that the current monarch was someone who believed in her mission. Since she was also something of a mercenary in the area. Since the sight of her bow in action inspired so many people during the final siege, and the power of her troop, she was relied upon whenever stragglers of demi-humans would rear their heads, or whenever monsters were causing trouble. Today, Nia was on her way to a cave which a Barghest had made its den. The people traveling with her weren't her usual group of Ainz stands, but instead some mercenaries from the south, who had traveled there to hear about the talk of a new religion in the north. When Nia explained it to them, they were somewhat shocked at first, but soon asked her more about him. Nia, of course, couldn't resist talking their ear off about his greatness, but soon found that she needed to head out to slay the beast that had been attacking villagers. The mercenaries, not ready to end it, asked if they could assist her and talk as they walked. Seeing as the extra help would be useful, she agreed. As the cave came into view, they could also see the remains of a poor soul that had been a victim to the Barghest. There was an incline near the side of the path that formed a small cliff that she had said would be a good spot to eat before they fought. As she was kneeling down to grab some of the rations, her keen senses heard the distinct sound of a bow knocking. She rolled to the side, just barely dodging the arrow that was most certainly aimed for her head. TCH. Missed. She is regarded as a genius archer, it's not surprising she dodged. From those two lines, she instantly knew that this wasn't an accident nor a third party, but a betrayal. What the hell was that for? She shouted at the one who made the shot. The South has grown tired of your preaching. Hearing what we heard today just confirms it. There's no way an undead can even come close to the greatness of the Six. Have you lost your mind? Or are the undead controlling you? Anger began to rise up in her chest. How could they insult the integrity of His Majesty like that? These people don't even know the meaning of loyalty. As she gave them a fierce glare, thought there was little difference to her face, she simply shouted, Ainz Sama is the greatest being to ever exist. Hearing you mock his greatness is truly pitiable. What, am I supposed to believe that you are better than him? The one who tried to kill me when my back was turned like a coward? Enough of this already. It's 12 against 1. Your spiels will die with you and your so-called religion. Nia simply held her sidearm at the ready, since fighting with a bow at this distance was practically impossible. She wasn't liking her odds. But if she simply gave up, that would just tell them that she was weak. Strength was needed to protect what one cares about, and the same applies here. If she couldn't defend His Majesty's honor by slaying these heretics, then what good was she? As the battle was about to break out, a figure descended from the sky that would certainly give all present nightmares for years. The being was clad in a dark green carapace, covered in so many spikes that it seemed like one would cut themselves by looking at it. Sides extended on the sides of its arms that gave all viewing them visions of death, like a grim reaper coming for their souls. and a head, which seemed to be somewhat mantis-like, with two antennae angling toward its back, and eyes that seemed to be glaring constantly, given their shape. The creature's very presence was enough to stop all parties in their tracks. Its every movement had their full attention. Its arm carrying a standard broadsword then began to move across its chest and the left side of its body, and with a grand swing, struck a pose, and shouted, "Justice has arrived." "What am I doing?" Touch Me chided himself after realizing the situation he had just put himself into. Since he rarely got to enact his fabled paragon of saving the weak as a police officer, he immediately jumped into action after seeing the supposed injustice at hand. But as he stood in his hero pose for a good 4 seconds, he began to realize just how little he thought this through. Am I even picking the right side here? Is this girl a villain they mentioned here worshipping an undead or something similar? And what's worse is I don't even know their levels. Damn, I really screwed myself, huh? Granted their weapons and armor look weak, but that could still just be a trick. In Yggdrasil, some players would pretend to be noobs that were just starting out by changing the looks of all their high-end gear to look like starter sets. They would get the jump on others by striking them when they least suspect it. Though this lead to the unwritten rule of kill on sight, as one would rather feel the shame of slaying a newbie than potentially lose a battle because of a bad first hit. Though these tactics weren't all that common, as most players who used those tactics would build in a stealth-based build, like Nishiki Enrai did, so such tricks were usually pointless. Plus most players said they wanted to look like a badass in fights, so such tricks were practically non-existent. But it would be bad if he got careless due to that fact. Even though he was one of the strongest players, signified by his World Champion class, assuming that these people were all level 100, he would be in for a tough time. And considering he had none of his gear, it would practically be an execution. Of the 14 people that were gathered at this spot, 13 of them were thinking the exact same thing. That being, who, or what is this thing? It was an insect-type monster, for sure, but what type was uncertain. Much of the world was still unknown, and of all the monsters in the world, insects were one of the lesser-known types. Doubly so for intelligent ones. And considering the wind from its pose has ripped up enough wind to disturb the flora a good 20 feet away, it was obviously strong. Seeing this inhuman creature acting decidedly human-like only amplified their unease. This thing was most likely attacking those who had disturbed its territory, but whatever the case, their target had changed. Just as they were deciding what to do, the creature began to speak. "Which one of you is my foe?" The voice it emitted was not what one would expect an insect to sound like. While one may imagine one to be very slimy and high-pitched, this voice was deep and powerful, and felt slightly robotic with how stiff it sounded. Before they could even comprehend what it had even said, Nia quickly jumped to the occasion and told the creature. "These men are trying to kill me, because I founded a religion that goes against their own. They are scum who deserve to die. You bitch." Before a counter-argument had even been said, the creature had seemingly made its choice by stating a bone-chilling judgment. I see. Panic set in before anything else. This creature was clearly not intelligent, given the way it had stuttered with a simple sentence. In other words, it was simply trying to act like a human. Though for what purpose, nobody knew. Driven by fear, the man unsheathed his blade and swung as hard as he could towards the neck before this thing had the chance to attack. If he could get lucky, maybe it would retreat or... The man never finished his thought. He had no need to now that he had become a stain on the floor. The nauseating scent of freshly spilled offal began to fill the air. Faster than the eye could see, the creature had used a God-given technique to obliterate their comrade before their brains even registered what had happened. Now. This creature's eyes hungered for blood, that was what these battle-hardened warriors' instincts had told them. With no choice left, they readied their bows. While Touch Me was listening to the girl's response, he was inclined to name her as the victim here, but cursed himself for stuttering at the changing scene. They surely saw him as nothing special after that display. But before he had enough to ask for the other side of the story and hopefully regain his confidence, he found one of the men charging at him, sword in hand. While he didn't want to fight them, given the infinitely disadvantageous situation he found himself in, he needed to stop the man without provoking the others. Just as he was about to say, "Now hold on a minute," the gesture he had been making with his sword arm had accidentally grazed the man. Given that he was wearing chain mail, and the swing had no effort put into it, seeing as it was a gesture meant for communication, he ignored this as the man would be fine and was about to de-escalate the situation by starting. "Now." As he started his speech, he realized that he had made a terrible mistake. To touch me, that strike wouldn't have even registered as hit. But that was going off the assumption that he was a high level like himself. To the level 7 mercenary, a slight graze from the level 100 warrior would be instantly fatal. He could have taken a strike from a ogre's club head-on and take less damage. A faint pang of relief ran through Touch Me, as he realized that the warrior band he was up against were actually weak, but that was quickly silenced by the realization that he had started hostilities with an unknown force. If they were under the protection of someone who was truly strong, then he would be in for a world of hurt. There were some hidden bosses that could be fought in Yggdrasil by fulfilling certain conditions or special quest. In some of these quests, you would have to kill a certain amount of NPCs who worshipped a certain god, and by killing them, would draw the wrath of that god, causing them to descend to the battlefield, and leading into some truly difficult raid battles, or in some rare cases, world-class enemies. If where he was followed the rules of Yggdrasil, then he should have accessed the situation more. Damn it! Why did I act so quickly? Well, no point in crying over spilt milk. I choose to rescue this girl, so that's what I intend to do. No matter the consequences. As the volley of arrows approached him, he honestly was embarrassed at how panicked he was a moment prior. They came at him so slowly that he wanted to yawn. He swiftly cut them out of the air, and while he could have ended things there by sending them back where they came from, he wanted to test if his skills were still available, to see if he truly was still level 100. So he selected one of his higher-tiered skills. Earth Rend. This skill allowed the user to strike at the ground beneath them, causing an AoE effect in a wide range that dealt a decent amount of damage and left the targets blinded and dizzy. At max power, it could easily encompass a mile in range. However, he didn't give it his all, for fear of harming the girl behind him. When the sword made contact with the ground, a large, C-shaped cloud of earth soon assaulted the men in question. Not only completely obliterating them, but destroying several trees within 200 feet of them, turning the once beautiful vista into fertile ground. Well, I guess that answers any questions about my level. It's a shame about the wildlife though. After confirming that he was indeed still the same level, he finally let himself relax, seeing as there seemed to be nothing in the vicinity coming to harm him. Though he quickly snapped out of his thoughts after realizing that he still hadn't explained anything to the girl. "Are you all right?" he asked her calmly while reaching a hand to her. She was hesitant at first, but after a moment's delay, took his hand and stood up, taking a moment to sweep the dust off of her body. Through her gaze, it was clear that she was clearly still suspicious of him. Though managed to say, "Thank you for helping me, whoever you are. I apologize for the late introduction. My name is Touch Me, and I have found myself a bit lost. I woke up in a cave nearby, and, understandably, am a bit confused as to how I got here. Would you mind filling me in?" Sure thing. This is the Northern Holy Kingdom. I am Nia Baraja, but before that, though this may be a bit rude, what exactly are you? While he was confused, seeing as heteromorphs were hardly uncommon in Yggdrasil, though a minority, as well as the fact that there was no place in Yggdrasil known as the Holy Kingdom. No, I can't focus on that right now. Right now, I simply have to get in her good graces. I am an insectoid. Do they not exist in this area? He questioned Nia. Well, it's not that they don't exist, but I've never seen one like you, nor one with the ability to speak. While the Zerns can, you don't look related to them, she responded. Zern? Once again terms were popping up that he had never even heard of before. His problem was a lack of information. He needed intel. I see. Well, I can assure you that I am not going to hurt you. I know this may be a bit much to ask, but can you take me to a nearby city or village so I can get my surroundings down? That may be a problem. I do apologize, as you may have just saved my life, but our country has recently been in a war with a large amount of invading demi-humans, so while I don't know if you are 1, people would certainly react negatively towards you. Do you know how to get back to where you came from? While he could have just said, I do not, please help me, he didn't want to reveal any intel that may compromise him. And from the conversation she was having earlier, he realized that she must be highly placed in this country to have founded a religion. And getting involved with her may lead to a large amount of attention placed upon himself. So he did the best thing he could at that moment. That was to leave and try to find a way out of the forest himself. Now that you have told me my location, I probably can make it back from here. Until we meet again. Wait, Before she could even register what had happened, the creature known as Touch Me had left his field of vision. If this were the Nia of the past, she most likely would have panicked after seeing the creature and not have been able to recover. But her experiences that she had accumulated over the course of the war had changed her worldview tremendously. If she had not met Lord Ainz, she would not have come to realize that creatures cannot be categorized as good and evil. Every member of every race has different views. After learning this, trusting unknown creatures like that became slightly easier. Still, what was that thing? Its power beggared belief. They said that there was an insectal demon god 200 years ago. Could that Touch Me be related to it? While she wasn't convinced, seeing as it attempted to help her instead of killing her, the emergence of beings like Ainz and Jaldabaoth may signify a new age of gods. She shook her head to clear it of these pointless thoughts. Well, from the looks of things the Barghest is gone, seeing as that creature had said it came out of that cave, and the fact that all this noise hasn't attracted it is certainly a sign that it's dead. Well, I guess I'll head back then. As she began to head back the way she came, her mood suddenly skyrocketed. Ainz informed us that he would be visiting the Holy Kingdom today. I can't be late and miss him. What kind of servant would I be? Increasing her speed, she ran down the path, hoping to make it in time to catch the reception. 2 days earlier. The Sorcerer Kingdom. A kingdom filled with all types of creatures and people that truly fit the word, diverse. This kingdom brought about 2 reactions when mentioned in conversations. To people who lived outside of the kingdom's walls, this name inspired fear and panic at the mere mention of it. A terrifying city of the dead, where its unholy ruler stood, with enough power to devastate the nations of man, and feel nothing as he did it. A place that common folk told their children about to keep them from wandering off. However, inside the walls of the kingdom, the exact opposite would be heard. Praise for the kingdom's safety and security, and streets that were devoid of crime. While that wasn't to say that crimes didn't exist, occasional misdemeanors still occurred. But true felonies were practically nil. A truly perfect utopia where women and children could walk the streets at night without fear. Where demi-humans and humans alike could live in harmony together, a feat once thought impossible to achieve. Save for one individual. The undead king, Ainz. This godlike being had destroyed his competitors with his unmatched might, his magical prowess making the most renowned magic casters look like amateurs. While fear was still existent in the masses, there were some who began to see this monarch as equal to the gods. Those at Karn village would mix his name into their prayers to the gods. And an actual religion was forming in the holy kingdoms that threatened to swallow up worship of the six. A godlike being, whose fealty could not be contested. Right now, this truly unstoppable being, was currently screaming into his pillow while rolling around his room. Well, that let out some of my frustration, but it's not helping me. The object of his ire was currently a stack of paper that had manifested itself onto Ainz's work desk in his room. While Albita would normally be here to do her own work, Ainz had suggested they put the work on his desk for him to find when he came in to do his important business, aka, acting lessons, so he could better accommodate the time slots of others' work schedule. While many denizens of Nazarik fought him on this, asking how such lowly servants could dare set foot in the Supreme One's room without prior notice, and after an excruciating battle, Ainz was forced to push it by force by enacted his guildmaster privilege of "my word is law." While Ainz had intended to take somewhat of a reprieve from work by taking the children to the Elven nation after completing a certain amount of work, that amount had skyrocketed in the recent days. Unsurprisingly, suddenly gaining millions of acres of land overnight would naturally cause the workload of the nation's superiors to have to handle the diplomacy and paperwork involved in incorporating it. While Ainz's own work could be summarized as, try to understand the document, give up, stamp, he still always felt like the nation would collapse because of this. While Albedo handled the real work of international affairs, something Ainz was eternally grateful for, he was still the one who signed off on decisions that the Sorcerer Kingdom would take. Thus, he constantly was under immense stress, praying that anything that he may mess up on would be caught by someone more reliable. Isn't there any way out of this? If there was, I'd take it in heartbeat. HAAA. Ainz knew that complaining about his predicament never helped, so he gathered his courage and began his day of work. Stamp. 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 The sounds of paper being turned into documents went on and on. With the pile of work still reaching near the ceiling, Ainz found himself simply laying his head on the table. How long has it been now anyways? Please, this is a nightmare. Isn't there any way I can stop this? Ainz racked his brains thinking of solutions for his current situation, when he finally stumbled on something after a long while. Didn't Demiurge say something about me going to the Holy Kingdom to help with Phase 3 in that plan? Something about increasing hostilities with the South by appeasing the North to escalate tension between the two? While I don't really get it and there isn't much worth anything to me in that kingdom, I'll take whatever I can right now. That way I can escape this torment, at least for a little while. I do wish he would stop being so coy though. Having made his conviction, Ainz cast his message spell. Demiurge. Ainz-sama. How may I assist you at present? Come to my quarters in Nazarik, I will explain everything to you once you arrive. I hear and obey. After a few minutes of waiting, Ainz heard a faint knocking at his door. Ainz-sama, I have arrived. You may enter. As the demon walked into the room, all smiles, he immediately kowtowed in front of Ainz. Ainz-sama, may I know why you have called me here? Ah yes, I intend to embark to the Holy Kingdom once more to assist you with your efforts in the Holy Kingdom. Ah, you mean that plan, Ainz-sama, correct? Since it was far too late to ask Demiurge what plan, as that would basically be throwing their respect for him out the window, he instead chose to quickly end the topic by entrusting fate with that life-saving sound known as Umu. It is just as you have surmised, Demiurge. I intend to head to the kingdom to increase my relationships with the victims of the war, to create an even stronger bond with those who worship me. As you wish, Ainz-sama, though it is not my place to say, what of your usual work by the desk? Shall we put that operation on hold? What about that amount as usual? He yelled to himself. And while he felt awful about what he was going to do, he had to act now, as it was too late to back out. Demiurge, while I am out on this excursion, I entrust the work of the kingdom's territory to you. Demiurge physically recoiled at the suggestion, with his glasses even slipping from his face slightly. As he hurriedly corrected himself, he asked in a panic, Ainz-sama. How could I dare do such a thing? Those documents are decisions moving forward, therefore only you should have the right to command such power. How could I, someone so inferior to your exalted self, ever attempt to take your place? No. I should be saying that to you. He thought to himself. Demiurge, what are you talking about? The results shown in the Holy Kingdom were born entirely out of your hard work. If I did not trust you, we would not have gone with you plan at all. I am entrusting these documents to you, Demiurge, as I know that your knowledge is extremely vast, and you're adept at seeing the future of the Sorcerer Kingdom. I believe that you know my intentions better than anyone else in Nazarik, and that is why I feel confident in entrusting this work to you. Demiurge appeared to be on the verge of tears at this heartfelt speech. Ainz-sama. I understand. I will not fail you and will show you results that your servant will assure to live up to the expectations you have of me. Ainz's non-existent stomach began cramping with the guilt of his actions. He had essentially taken the work he, as the master, should have done in the first place, and dumped it onto his loyal subordinates. I truly am a terrible boss. He thought. Very well, Demiurge. In the meantime, could you send an emissary to the Holy Kingdom and tell them of my coming? I would hate to barge in unannounced. Of course, Ainz-sama. Then I will be taking my leave. As the door to his room closed, he simply sighed to himself. While I hate the method I used, I at least got this work off my back for a while. But what do I even do while I'm at the Holy Kingdom? Well, no choice but to wing it, I guess. Ainz then left his room to look for the other guardians, while thinking to himself, I really need to organize another bath for the guardians. The sun was lowering from its zenith when Ainz arrived in town square, carrying his simple first-tier scepter. He was met with an entourage of people that had come to thank him for saving their kingdom, as well as King Caspond, who had come to pay his respects. Ah, Your Majesty, it has been far too long since we have last met. Indeed it has, Caspondano. Luckily this time it is on much more pleasant terms, so we can simply enjoy the peace of this village. The peace we are experiencing would not have been possible without the aid of Your Majesty. I truly cannot thank you enough for that. Think nothing of it. I merely came here for Jalda Baetha's maids. The real heroes are ones like Miss Baraja. Speaking of, where is she at the moment? Ah, we have been relying on her strength as of late, as her group has amassed quite a powerful force under her tutelage. She is currently hunting a Barghest that has been giving us trouble, so she should be back later today. I see. Then I would like to ask, are the materials from the Sorcerer Kingdom adequate? If not, I could have more sent your way? Of course not, Your Majesty. The materials are perfectly adequate. Your Majesty. A young girl interrupted the monarch while sprinting towards the king of another nation. Anyone else would have been summarily captured and reprimanded at the least, and if their intent seemed deadly, execution. Of course, the one sprinting, Nia Baraja, could get away with this, as she had a good relationship with both kings. Miss Baraja, you got here a lot earlier than anticipated. Dare I ask if the hunt was successful? Yes, the barghest was taken care of, but we ran into a hiccup along the way. As Nia began to explain the sequence of events that had transpired, the faces of the people around them, Caspon included, began to shift. That damnable South. I knew we couldn't trust them. The nerve. Similar cries of anger filled the air until it became a thunderous uproar. However, Caspon quieted them down before it got out of hand. I'm sorry that happened, Miss Baraja. But I would like to know more about this supposed warrior who saved you. We should have him come to the city so we can praise him directly. I agree, it sounds like a warrior of that caliber would be quite capable. Why did he not come back with you, or was it a passerby who was heading to another location? No, Ainz-sama, it's just, from the looks of him, he appeared to be a demi-human, so I felt it would be better not to risk it by letting him into town. The faces of the villagers, who were once filled with gratitude, now began to fill with unease, that the enemy that had caused them so much pain, had helped save their own savior. Caspon was no different and asked nervously. Miss Baraja, do you think it could be a deserter from Jaldabaoth's forces? Many of the demi-human commanders were known as famous individuals before the war. Did he leave his name? Demi-humans tend to be a proud lot, so I doubt he would just do this for free. Yes, he did do that. While I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, I think he called himself, Touch Me? For a moment Ainz doubted his ears. His brain couldn't understand what he was hearing. And in that brief moment, that lone, eternal moment, time had frozen to him, as he processed the information, wondering if what he had just heard was correct. And when he finally understood the words that were just uttered, an explosion of joy welled up inside him that could not be contained. His emotional suppressant went off so many times in the space of a few seconds, that one would think something was wrong with him. And when it finally managed to contain the torrent of happiness that was inside, he began to think logically. Though he didn't want to, he couldn't let a false name harm the great tomb. I mustn't get ahead of myself, this could be a similar situation to what those rats pulled a while back. Though Nia does respect me, and the situation would gain no merits through saying that name. Could this be a ploy from a third party to try and lure me out? Have the people who attacked Shaltir finally made their move? A maelstrom of hatred consumed his soul, roaring so loud that it left no room for any other emotion. Even the crowd that surrounded him could feel a shift in the air, as if the warmth of the world had left this single spot, leaving only a soul-chilling cold. If his foe had not only brainwashed Shaltir, but also used one of his treasured friends' names as a ploy, mere torture would seem merciful compared to what he was going to do. This was not the time to preserve his image. He couldn't care less if all the respect he had gained in his facade as a great ruler vanished to the wind if it meant seeing his friends again. He needed to know. Now. And Miss Baraja, please tell me more, I must know who this person is at all cost. Every last detail. No matter how minuscule. Tell me. Nia and the crowd were shocked at the shift in the behavior of the undead king. So far the side he had showed them was nothing less than perfect. But the sudden paradigm shift left a few dumbfounded. The reason being was that the person they were talking to was not Ainz, ruler of the great underground tomb of Nazarik, but Suzuki Satoru, the wage slave, who had finally emerged under the hope that his friends were still out there. Nia, however, had told him everything she knew, because she knew that her lord must have a reason for it. And after hearing everything, from his appearance, to his actions, to the words he spoke, all doubt in his heart was washed away, leaving only one answer. Touch Me had come to the New World. Ainz backed away from the startled Nia, dropping the scepter he was holding onto the floor and began to hyperventilate. Though his body shouldn't have allowed this. The amount of bliss that was coursing through his non-existent veins was so great that his earlier happiness would seem like simple content. If he had his old body, he would surely be crying by now. I need to assemble the Guardians. I apologize, but I will need to postpone this meeting for another day. This is extremely urgent. Gate. But why? Before Nia could finish her sentence, Ainz had practically leapt through the portal, leaving a very confused and uneasy crowd of bystanders, wondering what could panic the undead monarch so. Message, Albedo. I need you to summon all of the Guardians, including Victim, the Pleiades, and Sebas to the throne room immediately. Make this a top priority. Oh, of course, Ainz-sama, but what matter is so impert. Ainz once again had cut the conversation to an end, as he couldn't spare the time for meaningless chatter. His desire that he had longed for ever since he had first arrived in the new world was within his grasp. Don't worry, touch me. I will find you, and when I do, I will ensure that I give you the best welcoming in history. Ainz headed for the throne room, saying such childish things as he went, preparing for the search party that would surely be sent out. As the Guardians all gathered into the throne room, the mood in the air could best be described as worry. Very rarely did the most highly ranked people of their respective floors all meet in the same place like this. Considering Lord Ainz asked for the Pleiades to be here as well as Victim, the situation must be anything but normal. For all they knew, Nazarik may be in danger from an unknown force. While all of them had gathered previously for a reward ceremony, they had been given prior notice, and the summons was not this urgent. Which could only mean something unprecedented had happened. Once all of the members who had been requested had entered the room, that absolute ruler began to ascend the dais, and sat down to give his speech. My faithful Guardians, I cannot thank you enough for arriving on such short notice. I realized that this was out of the blue, but this matter simply could not be delayed. There is no need to thank us, Lord. Heeding to your beck and call is what we were created to do. There is no need to stand on ceremony for our sake. However, I would like to ask on behalf of everyone else what matter requires all of us present. For something of this scale, it must surely be a great threat. Asked Demiurge. All of the others in the room nodded, signifying that they agreed with his assessment. Nothing of the sort, Demiurge. You see, when I went to the Holy Kingdom earlier, I learned a piece of crucial intel. I am happy to report that I have more or less confirmed the existence of one of my friends in the New World. The air froze. The Guardians, whose very souls were giving their full attention to their master, seemed to increase in intensity by several dozen levels at once. The fact that they may once again be able to see another one of their exalted creators again, filled them with such immense joy. They very nearly showed their lord a disgraceful side of themselves by shouting really, but they managed to suppress it. Barely. Yes. It would seem that Miss Baraja was saved by a touch me on one of her excursions. Her words have confirmed his presence, so I hereby declare that we focus all of Nazarik into finding him. Ainz-sama, I beg your forgiveness for going against your own judgment, but could it be possible that the girl was mistaken? The words of worthless humans can hardly be considered proof. For all we know, this could be a ploy to lure us in. Let me go out in search of him with my team for this reason. Albedo asked in a slightly worried tone, which Ainz found odd. The other Guardians bathed her in suspicious gazes. Sebas very nearly glaring at her. Their lord was the master of the supreme beings, therefore he could not have gotten such things wrong. While it was true that a testimony from a human isn't the best proof, their master must surely have found a way to prove it that they could not. Nonsense, Albedo. For one thing, Nia shows a level of loyalty to me that rivals those from Nazarik. And she had mentioned several key details about him that cannot be faked, considering there is no way for anyone to know about him. Your team was sent to find them in case there was no definite proof, so we could quickly find the answer. But now with this, there is no longer a need for it. Since we have more or less confirmed his general location, I will have Nigredo survey the area with reconnaissance magic, and send out our entire supply of eyeball corpses. Since Ainz had practically enough Death Knights to replace the citizens of the country if he wanted to, he had began focusing his skills on higher-tiered undead to use in their stead as a main force. So because of this, he had hundreds of eyeball corpses languishing in storage at the moment. Now was the perfect time to use them. Of course, my lord, I apologize for going against your decision, please forgive me. Of course. You were simply following earlier orders. I am not petty enough to censure you for that. Now my guardians, while we are searching for Touch Me, I would like Nazarik's security level raised to maximum. The enemy may see this as a chance to attack, so we must not lower our guard. Lord! Damn it, damn it, damn it! Albedo began screaming to herself in the room that Ainz had given her, while pounding her fist into the wall. This, however, was a futile endeavor, as the great tomb of Nazarik could not be injured by mere fist, though the fact that she was only hurting herself but continued anyway just showed how deep her wrath was. How dare you pieces of filth return to my love's home? He is the only one who deserves to rule it. Not you scum. While Albedo knew that she shouldn't be saying such things so loudly, as speaking such words to any member of the tomb was essentially saying please kill me painfully, she could not keep her ire controlled under the circumstances. Even so, screaming her true feelings was a dangerous move. Damn that girl, had she not told Ainz Sama he was her, my team could have found him first without any witnesses. This just made things a lot harder. For starters, Ainz had essentially removed her dream team from existence as they were no longer required. Its power was the only way to ensure that her plan would work. The second was the fact that with another supreme being present, having him suddenly vanish would raise questions. Questions that could not be asked. I just don't understand. Why does our Lord place such importance on those who abandoned him? They don't deserve his boundless mercy. They should have been tossed to the side, just like they did with him. However, she couldn't sit here forever. Nazarik had entered maximum security mode, and as overseer, she had to fulfill her task. Mamanda-sama, when will you allow me to hear your great name once again? Touch Me had been wandering in the forest for a good few hours now. And while he had encountered some villages, he chose to stare from a distance, as if what that girl earlier said was true, then entering the cities in broad daylight was a bad idea. As people would freak out upon seeing the imposing warrior. Damn, this just got way more complicated. While heteromorphs were targeted in Yggdrasil, that was only by players. There was no such mechanics with NPCs. Maybe if I get to high ground I can spot a distant settlement that isn't populated by humans. At least there I may be able to get some more answers, so with his plan set, he scaled the tallest tree in the area in the blink of an eye. Anyone who was watching him may just think he used a teleportation spell. As he reached the top, he saw something that he was desperately hoping was not coming for him. In the distance, where he had just come from, were hundreds of eyeball corpses. There were so many it looked like a swarm of flies. Eyeball corpses could range from between level 70 to 90 and were immensely good at surveillance. If he really did piss off a higher up, then this may be the search team. This was beyond bad. Firstly, since all he had right now was a generic steel sword, he could not harm the eyeball corpses. Much like players, certain high-level enemies resisted attacks below certain levels, as well as weapons without enchants. Since Touch Me had none of his old gear, he could do nothing to harm even one eyeball. And second, was that eyeball corpses were specialized in scrying magic. Even a stealth-specialized character would find it hard to sneak past just one sufficiently high-level eye. And there were over 500 of them. To Touch Me, he may as well have been under a spotlight ringing a bell, and would have less of a chance to be found than right now. As he was thinking of what to do, one of the eyes seemingly looked directly at him. It may have been his imagination, but he couldn't risk it. He needed to run. Faster than the eye could see, he sprinted off to find a crevice or cave that he could hide in, until he found a small ditch that was underneath an incline. He immediately jumped in and proceeded to pray that they had not seen him. While only minutes had passed, to Touch Me, he felt like he waited for what seemed like hours. When he was finally sure that he hadn't been spotted, he finally breathed a sigh of relief, and turned to leave the literal hole he found himself in. Only to run face to eye with one of the corpses. Surrender. What other option was there other than to surrender? He was against a truly powerful opponent, with none of the things that made him so tough to fight in Yggdrasil. His items, armor, weapons, he left them all with Momon. To think that a player regarded as one of the best fighters in Yggdrasil would be surrendering without even putting up a fight, though when faced with these unbeatable odds, he was left with no choice. In the corner of his eye, he could see the other eyeball corpse converging on this location. He was caught. The best solution at this point would be to peacefully surrender and try to negotiate, for however meaningless it may be. He had attacked as a random third party on a group of unknown assailants. If he was attacked with this reasoning, he would have nothing to say. But Touch Me would do it again if given the chance. He could not just sit idly by as a defenseless girl was attacked by a group of thugs. If he turned a blind eye to that, then how could he call himself an ally to justice? Therefore, he made his resolve, and as he saw a tear in spacetime that was immediately recognized a eighth gate, he simply lowered his head and waited for the opposition to make their judgment. Touch San. This thoroughly unexpected shout had completely baffled him and thrown him into a state of confusion. As he looked up to see who had yelled his name, his was completely shocked to see an familiar-looking skeleton heading for him. Momon Sa, his shout was interrupted by being thrown into a full-force hug from his old friend, which while surprising, was not unpleasant, if not a bit rigid due to being made of bones. He returned the hug, happy to see that this army of the dead was heralded by a friend of yours. However, he did not know if his appearance made his current situation more confusing or less. Just what had happened to him? I thought I'd never see you again, Touch-san. You don't know how happy I am to have you here. I had begun to lose hope that any of you would come with me, but you're really here. Whoa, Momon-san, please slow down for a moment. What do you mean by transported? And why is your voice so deep? The things that his friend were saying seemed to make sense and not at the same time. While he could understand he was transported at the very least, the details of the situation still eluded him. Yet here there was a trusted ally, who seemed to possess all the answers he wanted to hear, as his friend's words implied he had been in this world for a very long time. Surely he would understand what had happened to him. Ah yes, my apologies, Touch-san, I'm just so thrilled that you're here. I'll explain everything once we are back in Nazarik. There is a lot to cover. Though admittedly I don't understand much of the situation myself. Though slightly disappointing at his lack of information, there was an even bigger question in his words that left him completely at a loss. Momon-san, what do you mean by back in Nazarik? Oh right, you see the thing is. Ainz-sama, Nazarik has engaged in maximum security mode. All of the preparations are set. And Touch Me-sama, it is truly an honor to see you once again, said Yuri Alpha, bowing as she exited the portal. That's what I mean. And so that's what happened. At least as much as I know. When both Momon and Touch Me entered the portal, they headed for their old meeting place. Momon began to explain to him the sequence of events that had transpired. Touch Me had such a mixture of emotions going through him, that he honestly didn't know what he was feeling. While his speech had clarified some things, it left more questions than answers. For starters, he now knew that the world they were in was not Yggdrasil, like he first assumed, but a completely new world, completely separate from the game. Though, that left the question, how could a world created before the game Yggdrasil was even a thing, have Yggdrasil concepts and creatures living within it? Unless this was a coincidence on a universal scale, it truly made no sense. The second was how Nazarik was here and completely real. While he was shocked to learn that all of their work throughout the years had come to life, he was also filled with pride, walking through the halls they had meticulously crafted with their efforts. Though this was not the time for such things, he could admire their work later. Finally was the matter of the NPCs. Momon had said that when he had arrived in the new world, all of the NPCs gained wills of their own, and saw them as their creators who were deemed as gods that they would do anything for. Honestly, it all sounds so absurd that I can barely wrap my head around it. But since it's in front of me, I have to accept it. It feels weird. Touch Me had said his honest thoughts on the matter, which prompted a laugh from Momon. Ah, now you know how I felt, Touch-san. it is nice to finally be able to have someone here again that I can relate to. It's so stifling when no one would know what you're talking about. So to be able to speak without any care once more, it's simply bliss. Still, that was then and this is now. He stated with an implied smile. Another thing, Momon-san, the way you've been talking seems different than your usual speech. What's up with that? He asked. Ever since they had begun talking, Touch Me could sense something off about his speech patterns. Even after years of being apart, it was obvious that something had changed. He used to be much more causal, and barely used formality at all. Yet now, his mannerisms were very regal and somewhat refined. Well, since everyone saw me as an all-knowing god from day one, I had to change my speech to sound like a ruler. I guess I've done it so often it's just part of my normal speech patterns. Touch-san, it has truly been an experience like no other. Even my job back on Earth wasn't this tiring. I've had no one to confide in, no one to talk to on an eye-to-eye level, since everyone seems to think that I'm an unmatched king of kings. It really is troublesome. His torrent of criticism flowed out, like a dam that had been on the brink of collapse, only to finally burst open, reminding him of his own rants he had with his wife. Well, if you're seen as an absolute ruler, then why not order them to talk like your equals? I can't do that for multiple reasons. One of them is that the NPCs desire a master-servant relationship, so as their master, it is my duty to repay their loyalty by pretending to be the master that they think I am. No matter how tiring it is on me. The second is that it is fundamentally impossible for them to have that attitude with me. Hell, even asking Narberl to refer to me with San caused her to develop a verbal tic whenever she attempts it, because she struggles to say it every time. You always were kind, Momon-san. I mean, you're sacrificing your own happiness just so the NPCs can be happy. Honestly, that is extremely admirable. Touch Me's words had come from the heart. Having one give up their own life for the sake of others was something that he honestly felt it would be difficult to do, at least given the same situation. Please don't say that, Touch-san. I am only kind to all of those within the Great Tomb. Due to my undead body, I feel nothing towards others outside of Nazarik. While there are those that gain my favor, due to spending time with them, I don't see humans as anything other than ants. I've killed thousands ever since I've been transported, and Nazarik itself has killed countless. We've toppled nations in order to conquer the world, crushing the dreams and ambitions of others in the process, and I honestly couldn't care. I haven't yet deteriorated to the point of killing for fun, and I dislike the deaths of the innocent and children. Nazarik remains my top priority. Touch Me was honestly shocked to hear about what the Great Tomb had done. While he could understand where he was coming from, as his insect body gave him a very similar mindset, he still did care for others' well-being. I am sorry for not being able to manage Nazarik well. It's just, how am I, a simple 9-to-5 office drone, supposed to effectively manage a country? Nazarik simply began to run ahead of me before I could catch up. Yet despite what we've done, I am trying to steer its direction for the better, by creating a utopia. This world is diverse, in the same way Yggdrasil was, but it also suffers from the same problem of humans, so I wanted to recreate what Ainz had, by managing every race in a paradise of a city. Touch Me was quiet for a while as he processed what he had just heard. He had mixed feelings, and felt various emotions through it all. Of course, even though acting out justice was his motto, at the end of the day, reality is hardly able to accommodate his wishes. He was no fool, and he was not here to witness what had happened, so he could withhold his judgment for the moment. Yet even when he attempted to imagine the worst-case scenario, of his friend slaughtering with no rhyme or reason, he couldn't bring himself to get mad. His morals told him it was wrong, but at most, the imagery brought the words annoying to his mind. Like a student watching the local bully burning insects. It was in poor taste, but why does it matter? After all, they were simply lower life forms. The words flowed out quietly, almost inaudible. Yet as he tasted their meaning, it was obvious that his mental faculties had changed drastically. Even thinking back to when he first arrived, had he not killed a group of people without so much as an ounce of guilt? Sure, they were criminals, but he really didn't have much proof other than the testimony of a young girl. Yet that was all it took for him to end their lives. That being the case, it would be hypocritical of him to rebuke Momon for his actions, given his own. I guess I can't really blame you, Momon-san. Even if I were to try and reprimand you for all these things, I don't know how everything played out. So I can't really judge you for it. My own mind has been affected as well, so it's not like I don't get where you're coming from. Besides, looking at it pragmatically, nations attack others to gain territory all the time, so wars are hardly something blame can even be assigned to. Not to mention, with just how many evil NPCs that we created, I honestly can't see things going any other way. I suppose that's true. But it's because of those NPCs that I can effectively play the role of ruler. Honestly, I want to thank Albert from the bottom of my heart for making Demiurge so smart. I can't tell you how many times I've had Demiurge explain my true thoughts to the rest of the Guardians, which gives me the air of a genius. Though I don't know how he comes to these conclusions. He grumbled. While Touch Me was curious at what he meant by that, he still hadn't asked the most important question. By the way, have you found any way to go back to our original world? Surely that must have been a priority? The lights in his friend's eyes flared for a moment, before dimming back to their usual luminosity. Though he did not know the significance of the action, he could tell the question caught him off guard. I'm afraid not. I don't even know how we got here, much less how to leave. But if I'm honest, Touch-san, I haven't even tried. I don't want to go back. I had no family, no real friends other than you guys, and a terrible job in a terrible world. For all my complaining, it ultimately is better than working for the megacorporations. Though it's a different matter if you want to go back, as I understand that you have a family, and don't want to leave them behind. If that is what you wish, then I can have the Guardians begin to search for one. Sorry for that, Momon-san, I didn't think of it from your perspective. I can see why this may be a better life, so sorry for making it seem like you had to have found a way. But thank you. While I too am enamored with this place, I have too much to lose back there. So while the offer is tempting, I think I would like to go back. I figured as much. Still, you should stay here and indulge the NPCs, at least for a little bit. They feel like the reason all of you left was because they weren't good enough, and so strive to do the best they can, so I will never leave. Seeing you come back probably made them elated. Honestly, I see them all as our children. They've taken on personality traits shared by their creators, and after everything we've been through, it's hard to see them as anything else. Hearing these words felt quite surreal. While it was true that the ones who created them were definitely them, that was just a mechanic of the game, so would that really qualify them as their children? Though when he thought about just how much care went into the backstories and appearance of the NPCs, he could begin to see it. After thinking about these ramifications, he began to feel a bit guilty that he didn't much effort into Sebas. Honestly, when you get the chance, you should talk with Sebas. He has inherited your unflinching justice ideals, and even saved a slave from a brothel. Who knows, maybe they'll enter a relationship down the line. It is nice to talk about such meaningless topics again with you. I've missed this feeling, being able to speak to one another as an equal, without fear of judgment. I guess I'll have to, seeing as he is my own creation after all, though it feels weird to have someone who looks twice as old as me be my child. You're the one who was so uncreative when making him. Did you really design him after your own looks though? He looks basically perfect. Well, you know how games are, they tend to beautify things. That is true. A silence descended over the two after their talk. This was not an awkward silence, however. It was simply two friends enjoying the moment that they were having together after so long, and a calming atmosphere filled the room that would surely make anyone within drop their guard. So, seeing as I may end up being here for the long haul, do you have any gear I can use? I know I told you to sell all of my old stuff, but... well, you see, I couldn't bring myself to do that, in case you came back. All of it is still down in the treasury. We can go and get it now if you like. Then that makes things a lot simpler. If that's the case, then let's go. Ainz at this moment was extremely happy that he had not sold the armor and weapons like he had been offered. Granted, people would probably be clamoring to get the gear worn by the former world champion. Yet when he posed the question to himself, What is more important, gold or memories? He chose the latter without any hesitation. Ah. Truly it is bliss to talk with my old friend again. If he was able to come here, then maybe there's a chance the others will as well. I truly hope so, since Touch-san won't stay forever. I need to cherish these moments. If I don't, then I'll just eventually forget all of these wonderful moments me and the guild had. I already have trouble recollecting the finer details. A profound sense of loss began to fill Ainz, but he soon shook it off, as the presence of his former friend filled him with happiness that could overcome his sadness. As he went to activate his ring to head to the treasury, he soon remembered what, or rather who, was down there. Yua, not that guy, he's the last person I want Touch-san to see. Please be out adventuring at this time, please. Greetings, Father. My most august creator. Oh. And Touch-me-sama as well. Truly it is an honor to have you stand within these revered walls once again. As Ainz walked down the treasury's vast hallways with Touch-me, he pleaded that his greatest shame, his past, was outplaying his Momon persona, and would not be here for all to bear witness to. Unfortunately, Ainz soon found himself with his head in his hands as his dark past reared its head to one of his closest friends. He simply wanted to crawl into a hole and die. If Touch-me could make facial expressions, it would surely be morphed into a cringe. Why did I have to tell Touch-san that the NPCs take after their creators? What can I even say to this? Oh, all of the NPCs are like their creators except mine. Who the hell would buy that excuse? Ah, yes, Touch-san, this is my NPC, Pandora's actor. I created him after you left, so you likely wouldn't know about him. Feel free to ignore his shenanigans, he whispered to him, hoping that Pandora would not pick up on it. Oh, I always wondered what kind of NPC you would make if got the chance. A doppelganger, huh? Not what I would have expected. Still, it seems that you've got a great fashion sense, Momon. That military garb seems to fit his race unexpectedly well. While Ainz was a bit shocked to be told he had a good fashion sense, he let it slide as he was relieved that Touch-me did not seem to notice his over-exaggerations. This was good as he didn't want his friend to realize his dark past. The wound left by Shizu's Yua had not yet healed, and he could only imagine that the fictional scar would be ripped open and torn asunder if one of his friends did the same. Wanda Bar. I'm glad to hear that, Touch-me-sama. It goes without saying that the leader of the Supreme Beings would naturally know how to create a truly marvelous garment, as I so deeply cherish the garb that I have been bestow. Pandora's actor, while we would love to stay and talk, I feel it would be best if you performed your duties as Momon at the moment. Don't you normally leave around this time? Ainz interjected, hoping to get his personifications of his Chinibya phase to leave as quickly as possible. Indeed I do, Ainz-sama. However, I normally leave 2 minutes and 37 seconds from this moment. Would you like me to depart earlier? You don't have to be that exact. Ainz thought to himself. I feel that would be best, Pandora's actor. I look forward to your return. As do I, Ainz-sama. Over dramatic. What other word could possibly fit this situation? What other word could possibly fit his personality? Everything about him was meant to scream, I am cool, but the way he acted seemed to be a kindergarten's way of expressing that. As they watched him teleport away, Touch-me asked Ainz, so that was your NPC, huh? I like him. Seems lively. You don't know the half of it. Ah, yes, he certainly is, isn't he? I made him to be a memory of the guild so that he would embody all of us, by making him have all of the 41 as his forms. But when I think about it, having him be what represents the guild is a bit, well anyway, let's go and get you gear, he quickly stated, trying to steer the conversation away from him. As they walked towards the mausoleum, Touch-me asked, by the way, what was that Momon persona that you were talking about? Something to help the great tomb? Ah, when I first came to this world, I had become an adventurer named Momon to learn more about it without seeming suspicious, and throughout my time as a hero, I have become renowned as the Raven Black Hero. While I used to use that as an excuse to escape work for a bit, Pandora's actor tends to fulfill that role for now, since I have to play the part of the Sorcerer King. Now Momon is more of a way to get a heads up on those who wish to conspire against me. Ainz said, purposely omitting the part about how Touch Me was what inspired the idea. Wow, Momon, seems that you still suck at creative names, don't you? Well, I'll have to watch him sometime and see what he's like. Oh, it seems we're here. As they reached their destination, Touch Me took the time to take in the view around him. They were flanked by grotesque forms of the old guild members. Each one oddly proportioned in a weird fashion, such as limbs being elongated from their natural size, to mismatching eyes. It almost seemed like a creature from a nightmare, taking on a familiar shape, only to reach out with its body morphing and shifting to inspire fear. Though when one disregarded that fact, the atmosphere in the room felt very somber. The dim lighting in contrast with the statues of old friends gave it the air of a mausoleum. Ainz said to Touch Me. While this was originally the deepest parts of the treasury, meant as a last stand against intruders, I renamed it, since it felt more like a memorial to all of you the more of you left. Each time I came down here to build a new statue, it felt like a part of me was lost. You were everything to me, as my life outside of Yggdrasil wasn't much outside of work. So I always hoped that at least one of you would come back one day. Which is why I kept the tomb, ready for any of you to return. After hearing this heart-wrenching cry, which most surely came from the depths of his friend's soul, it reminded him of how he got here in the first place. I'm sorry I wasn't here for you on the last day. It's fine, Touch-san, barely anyone did. I recognize that you had other matters to attend to in your life. Some things just take priority. Here, you should put on your equipment. Accessing the inventory of the statues, he pulled out all of Touch Me's old, world champion, gear and watched as his friend donned the shining white armor, the luster of which seemed to brighten the room by merely existing within its walls, though how exactly the sides on his arms fit into the gauntlets was a mystery. He felt a burst of nostalgia, seeing his friend the way he always remembered him, though his presence being amplified by the fact that this was no longer a game. At this moment, he remembered a question he should have asked the moment he arrived. Touch-san, I want you to know that I changed my name to Ainz, to both honor the guild and as a way to find any of you who may have come to the new world as well. But are you okay with me using that name? This was the name that represented all of us, the guild, so I don't feel like it is something that I can take for myself. If you have any issues with it, I will immediately change my name back to Momon to everyone. Momon-san, I feel as if that name couldn't have been better to represent you. Even after everyone left, you stayed and maintained the guild's home until the end. In a way, you are Ainz. The fact of the matter is, the fact that you would even ask that question shows that you are worthy to bear the name. These words, said by one of his closest friends, had a deep effect on Ainz's soul. Hearing how much his friend appreciated his work that he had spent all of his free time to maintain, brought an immense amount of joy to his heart. Thank you, Touch-san, he said. I should be the one thanking you, Momon-san. Anyway, now that we have gotten my gear, what now? Is there anything that we can to pass the time in this world? Well, unless we want to go exploring this world, which doesn't seem like that bad of an idea, all things considered. You mentioned interest in the Momon persona, right? Why don't we just watch him act out his duties through the mirror? Alright then. I'd like to see your take on a hero, he asked warmly. Then let's not waste any more time. Oh, before I forget, here. As Ainz said this, he handed his friend a ring of Ainz. Welcome back, Touch-san. Momon-san, is that? Please stop. As Ainz went to turn on the mirror to view Pandora's actor, he was somewhat excited to see how his friend, who was known for being a superhero fanatic, would respond to his own created hero. However, when the mirror began to focus in on the designated target, he realized he forgot one fatal error. That kinda looks like. Don't. A giant Jungarian hamst. Stoop. How could he have forgotten about Hamsuk? While Pandora's actor was bad enough in its own right, he completely forgot about how Momon, a warrior of song and story, rides a child's pet into battle. Hey Momon, did you have to ride that thing when you were playing the part of Momon? Though Touch Me was trying his best to hide it, he was snickering slightly under his helm. I had no choice. This world seems to think that he is a fearsome beast for some reason, and I'm the only one who seems to think otherwise. Even the guardians say its eyes gleam with power. I felt like an old man on a merry-go-round when I had to ride that thing. Ainz, finally having someone who could understand where he was coming from, poured his soul out regarding the strange aesthetics of this world, and how people seemed to think that Hamsuk was a terrifying creature. Ainz couldn't tell if Touch Me's silence after his rant was due to understanding, pity, or a mix of both. Though whatever the reason, he was sparing Ainz any further embarrassment. Instead choosing to ask some questions about the character. So you mentioned that you wanted him to be an ideal hero. What does that entail exactly? Like my ideals of helping the weak is common sense, or something else? Well, I tired to go by your rules when I can, but I just make sure I'm someone who is modest about their strength to the masses, while at the same time, defending those who need it. Honestly, I don't know what I did before this to get so many supporters, but right now, I'm the defender of the City 4. Standing up against the wicked Sorcerer King. Honestly, I don't think it even matters what I do. I could go for a walk and solve world hunger, it seems like. Touch Me simply responded with a hum as they continued to watch how the hero Momon had established himself. From helping random passerbys, to his regular patrol, and at one point the conversations people had about their worries about the Sorcerer King, which Ainz smiled evilly, seeing how the plan was working how he had intended. Suddenly, an idea struck him on what they could, or rather should do before they got too carried away. Touch-san, I feel like you should meet the other NPCs before we go any further. Honestly, I feel like it's a necessity, since you'll soon learn that the word alone has no meaning to us most of the time. Plus you can see how they have evolved from when they first started as mere data. Yeah, that does sound like something I need to do. I think the first thing I should have thought of doing that already, but I guess some things needed to take priority. Well, who should we see first? Normally I'd call a meeting with the Guardians to have them all see you at once, but I think you should speak with Sebas before we go to the others. He is your own creation after all. Based on how they all seem to treasure our existence, it would be cruel to delay a meeting with the two of you after all. Though I should cancel the maximum security mode though. After sending a message to Albedo to resume normal activity, he thought of what he wanted to say to Sebas, then, after some thought, cast his message. Sebas, are you free at the moment? Ainz-sama, it is our duty to respond to your call no matter the situation. What do you need of me at present? I don't need anything from you, I would just like for you and Touch Me to talk to each other before I hold a meeting announcing his arrival to the Guardians. You are his creation, so I feel it would only be fair if I gave you two a bit of time to catch up before we continue with our operations. Thank you for this opportunity, Ainz-sama. Truly I could ask for no greater reward. I am eternally grateful. Umu, he is in the guest room of Nazarik when you are ready. After terminating the message, he turned to Touch Me. Well, I'm going to finish my duties in Nazarik to give you to some time alone. After that I'll summon the Guardians to the throne and you can meet them all at once. Got it, Mamanga-san. I'll message you when we're done. As Ainz left the room, Touch Me couldn't help but wonder how his creation would have turned out. He hadn't added any backstory to him, so how much inspiration from himself could he really have? To say that Touch Me was nervous was an understatement. He was about to meet with someone who saw him as nothing less than an infallible god. Now, as a member of the police force, he was obviously recognized as others' superior, as he had been working there for a long while, but that was still just a boss-to-subordinate relationship. This type of thing was something that people rarely went through. No, maybe Mamanga was the only one who had this type of experience. Then at that moment, a gentle knocking could be heard from the giant double doors that served as the room's entrance. He knew who it was before he even heard their voice. Touch Me-sama, may I have permission to enter? While every denizen of Nazarik would respond in this way if one of their exalted creators was in a room, a sign of their unwavering loyalty, it seemed to be further amplified by Sebas, who was created in the form of a butler. Ah. You may enter. As the door opened, the ever-stoic servant strode over to his master and immediately knelt before him. I cannot express how delighted I am to see you once more, Touch Me-sama. I stand ready to serve you from now until the end of time. May I ask what task requires my attention at this time? Sebas said this as effortlessly as reading it off a script. It was obvious that he had been thinking about what to say beforehand. Momon-san, I completely understand where you were coming from. How did you manage to deal with this every day? AI, it is nothing important, Sebas. I merely wish to have a talk with you about what has gone on in Nazarik in my absence. Why don't you sit down on the couch across from me? He had made this gesture for 2 reasons. The first was because it was simply common courtesy to offer one a seat when talking to someone. Anyone who does not do such things must surely be a person who had never been into contact with any social setting, to say nothing of their manners. The second reason was because Touch Me was already getting anxious at the prolonged kneel. Anyone would feel strange if somebody they were trying to talk with adopted a posture of submissiveness. He merely wanted to have a man-to-man conversation with his creation, not give out orders. So he had hoped that Sebas would take the hint and comply with his wishes. Surely you jest, my lord. Doing so would imply that I am your equal. How could I ever hope to not only stand at the same level of a supreme being, but my own creator? The very thought is blasphemy. Much to his chagrin, he did not. Ha! Sebas, I am simply want to talk to you about the going-ons of Nazarik. If we were to engage in a conversation like this, it would make me a bit upset having to speak down to you like this. Could you please sit there for my sake? After Sebas balanced the scales of his mind between his creator's wishes and his own ideas of etiquette, that is to say, immediately choosing to sit where his creator had instructed, Touch Me started off with a simple question that he was curious about. Now then, Sebas, I heard from Momon-san that you had rescued a girl from slavery, is that true? Touch Me was honestly delighted when he had heard this. It would seem that his own creation was living out the fantasy he had always dreamed about, being an ally to justice who helped those in peril. Thus, he felt like he could easily get along with him. However, to his surprise, Sebas's face had changed to show the slightest hint of worry on his face, so little that Touch Me thought that he had imagined it. But the tone he had was obviously coming from one who feared rebuke. Yes, my lord, I did save such a girl. If that was not what you wished of me, I will immediately correct the mistake by taking her life. I went against the wishes of Ainz-sama in your absence, and will atone with my life if necessary. That was not a joke. He truly would kill himself and the girl if he ordered him to do so. Momon-san warned me of their loyalty, but this is too much. He is willing to kill a girl who he has a close relationship with and himself because he thinks he may have disobeyed me. No. There is no need for such measures, Sebas. I am not going to reprimand you for taking those actions. Instead, I wanted to praise you for them. By doing that, you have shown me that you have taken my own ideals to heart, something I am very grateful for. May I ask how things are going with you too? Thank you, my lord, and you need not ask anything of us. Simply give us the command and we shall obey. As for our relationship, it's hard to say. While right now I am training Twer to become the head maid of the outside world, we get along well enough outside of that. Ah, so her name is Twer. How nice. Though I wonder why there need to train her. And how is the training going so far? Twer, in my opinion, is still a far cry from being held up to the same level as the homunculus maids, though she is still far better than any human maid at this point in time. Though right now I am teaching her how to lead over others with the help of Yuri, though it is proving to be slightly difficult due to her past experiences. Touch Me couldn't help but fear he had accidentally pried too deep, and so quickly made to change the topic. I see. Well, seeing how I've asked a question of you, would you like to ask me one? This was only natural, seeing as this was not only polite, but would feel uncomfortable if he kept prying into his life like this. Very well, my lord. If I may be so bold, may I ask why you had left us? Touch Me didn't know why he was surprised. He should have expected this to be the first thing he was asked, which it was. Yet he still found himself to be shocked when it was. He honestly didn't know what to say here. It would be bad to say something like, "Oh, I just lost interest." How would the denizens of Nazarik take such an answer? They would probably assume they weren't good enough and fall into depression, so that was a no-go. While he could make something up like, "I was forcibly pulled away from this world," he would have to keep that narrative for the rest of his time here. And it wouldn't make sense to want to leave this world again if he supposedly didn't want to the first time. For all he knew, that just might make things worse. So in the end, he could only go with a half-truth. Well, you see, Sebas, Yggdrasil was not my only life. I also had a family and other duties to attend to outside of it. I merely left because my responsibilities were growing over there, and I could no longer focus my attention with the great tomb, so I left it to the others. This way he could keep things on both sides safe by telling them half the reason, as caring for his family took precedence over the game. I see. So you have a family outside of Yggdrasil. Then where are they now? If a supreme being has taken a lover, then it is only natural that we treat them the same as all of you. Here comes the hard part. Well, you see, Sebas, I did not come here of my own volition. I was pulled into this world by forces unknown, and I am sorry, but I may not stay here for long, as I need to find a way back. That way I can be with my family as opposed to being stranded in an unknown world. While the Butler of Steel was known for being a very stoic individual, with facial expressions being very limited, even someone who had never met him before could clearly see the sadness on his face. I see. Sebas's tone had become radically different after hearing these news. So Touch Me quickly made to cheer him up. Of course that doesn't mean I will be leaving right away. It may be months or even years before I go back. After saying this, Touch Me realized that in his attempt to smooth things over with Sebas, he had made himself depressed at the prospect of not seeing his family for that long. Or maybe in the worst case scenario, never again. No, that won't happen. Of course, my lord, it's just upsetting to know you will one day leave again. Of course, if that is your wish, then I will not object. We will use all of the power available to us to help find a way out of that is what you desire. His voice seemed to be changing emotional states so rapidly that one may think he was bipolar at this point. The air in the room became rather awkward for a few moments after this, as neither party knew what to say next. One party didn't want to be rude by speaking before the other, and the other wanted the other party to speak without him starting the conversation, which naturally led nowhere. The conversation thus far seemed to be both enjoyable and difficult at the same time, bittersweet, in a word. And after a small amount of time had passed, Touch Me had decided to continue this another time. Well, Sebas, as much as I would like to continue our conversation, Momon-san will be calling a meeting in the throne room, son, so it looks like we will have to postpone this for another time. Very well, if that is what you wish, my lord. Then if you'll excuse me, I will be taking my leave. Though it was clear that Sebas didn't want to end things there, he had obeyed, as it was an order from his creator. Leaving a mentally exhausted Touch Me to simply think, Momon-san, how do you do it? My faithful guardians, I thank you for once again coming here as quick as you do. And for good reason. While I had mentioned his presence earlier, I would like to welcome Touch Me back to Nazarik. Signaling toward him with a gesture, he allowed Touch Me to make his entrance, and to all the guardians present, the way he moved to the dais was very regal, worthy of a supreme being, though Momon was keenly aware of how he and Touch Me felt about this, and thus, noticed the minor details that told him that Touch Me was nervous. To top it off, Touch Me didn't have his emotional suppression, which meant the pressure must surely be harder on him. Thank you for the warm welcome, floor guardians. As you know, I am Touch Me, and I would like to say I am truly grateful that you would all organize this ceremony just for my return. However, to Ainz's surprise, Touch Me seemingly managed to say his lines without any warbling in his voice, nor slip-ups. He didn't know if it was because of his prior experience as a police officer, or if he was just naturally good at this due to his role-playing of a hero. How could we do anything less? The return of the Supreme One should be top priority to any Nazarik denizen. Anyone who thinks otherwise must surely lack the proper attitude one should take with a Supreme Being. I am an agreement with Aura. Anyone who thinks the return of a Supreme One is not cause for celebration, does not belong in Nazarik. After hearing these similar responses, Touch Me looked over at Ainz, who seemed to be giving his best attempt to see what I mean face. While he had understood how loyal they all were when talking with Sebas, the sight still shocked him. Regardless, I am thankful to each and every one of you for all that you have done, and I hope that you continue what you all have been accomplishing. Of course, my lords. We the Guardians shall pledge our utmost fidelity to you once more. This we vow. This we vow. After hearing Albedo's pledge, followed by the rest of the Guardians, both of them had nothing left to say other than Omo, and after hearing his recoronation, both of them watched over the utterly exited Guardians, and for the first time, both Ainz and the Guardians both wondered the same thing. Will the other supreme beings return as well?
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.